Hello and welcome to Follow the Bookkeeper. I am your host, Morgan Trine. And today's episode is going to be talking all about why it's so hard to find a good accounting professionals. And so we're going to break this into two sections. First, why it's hard to find a good bookkeeper, and then secondly, why it's hard to find a good tax preparer. So we're going to start with why it's hard to find a good bookkeeper first. So there is no degree requirement or certification requirement to be a bookkeeper in the US. And so this means that if you wake up tomorrow morning and you start marketing yourself as a bookkeeper, there's nothing illegal about that. And so this is something that I think is both good and bad, right? So the bad is that you as the business owner trying to find a bookkeeper requires you to do a lot more due diligence, right? Because you're the person that's then having to sort through, is this person qualified to do this job or not? And without requirements, it can be harder to do that. On the flip side, what I see is that it allows a ton of people to have either second careers or to have, first careers that don't require a degree. And so it allows a lot more people to be in the profession and make a, decent living wage without a degree requirement. And I do think that there is not enough jobs within the US right now that have those, has that ability for someone without a degree to make a decent living. And so I think there is a lot of value in allowing anyone to be in the profession. That being said, the drawbacks of having to sort through who is actually qualified or not absolutely does add an extra level of research that you as the business owner have to do when you are finding a bookkeeping professional. So there's just that variability because there isn't those requirements. The second reason is that there's this mindset that bookkeeping is just an admin task. We went into this more in the episode on what is bookkeeping, but it's not just an admin task. And so you have some people who are like, oh, my VA can do this. And with certain businesses, that can be true. However, bookkeeping requires an understanding of tax implications. So if you think of it as just an admin task, depending on the business, you can get, the majority of the way there. But if you don't understand the tax implications of why you do certain things within bookkeeping, then you're leaving yourself open to liability potentially. And so you need someone as a bookkeeper who understands tax implications. And so this is one of those things where bookkeeping is not tax preparation. And so there is specialized tax knowledge that tax preparers, should have. But as a bookkeeper, it's one of those fields that is related, but not, it's a Venn diagram, right? So you have to have overlapping knowledge with tax preparation information. And so when you think of it as just an admin task, you're missing out on all of that overlap section of the Venn diagram of here's why you do certain things due to tax implications based on the current tax law, the business entity and structure type. And so if you're looking for a bookkeeper, that would be one of the things I would sort of ask questions about is how familiar are you on tax implications and how does, the current tax landscape inform how you do bookkeeping? Because a lot of bookkeepers, if they haven't done any additional training on their own, right? If they haven't taken any courses, done any of any continuing education things that is relevant, there are resources like that available, then that's where you can get into issues with a bookkeeper that's not going to be able to fully support your needs, potentially because you have to understand how the flow of information from the bookkeeping reports goes into the tax return. You don't have to understand like the nitty-gritty of tax law and tax compliance, but you need to understand enough to know why you do certain things and when you need support from a tax preparer that has that like deep specialized knowledge on taxes. And then thirdly, fourthly, wherever we are in the list, bookkeeping is, and again, this goes into the what is bookkeeping video. Bookkeeping can be both bookkeeping for compliance, i.e. bookkeeping to prepare the tax return, but also bookkeeping for management decision purposes. And so if you have a like a newer bookkeeper, potentially, they may not understand that difference between compliance versus management. And so as you, like for a bookkeeper who hasn't done any, further education for themselves, that difference between compliance and management means that they may not be able to support your business if what you need is management, or even like if you as the business owner don't understand the types of questions you're asking, if those fit into the management side of things versus the compliance side of things, and the bookkeeper doesn't know, then there's the potential for mix up to happen. Oh, I can do this, not understanding you only do this for compliance, then you need to change it for the management side of things, or vice versa. So those are some of the pitfalls about why it's hard to find a bookkeeper these days. Now, so we're moving on to the tax preparer side of things. And this is a little bit, there's more data on this side because it is a more regulated part of the accounting umbrella. So the first thing is that when we talk about tax preparers, we're really talking about 3 different designations. So there is a CPA, and the CPA is someone who has an accounting degree from a university and passed the CPA exam. And so that is a very intense exam. You have to pay money to do that exam. There's a lot of investment that goes into it. And so it's sort of considered the highest level of tax knowledge because there's the most resource, time, and energy that you have to put in to get it. That being said, some CPAs don't do taxes. They do audits for bigger corporations, or there's a lot of different things you can do within CPAs. So just because someone's a CPA doesn't mean they file taxes, but if you search, small business CPA, that you will get someone who can file your taxes. The second designation is EA, and that's enrolled agent. And that is someone who has gone through a 3-part test series with the IRS to certify that they can file taxes and correspond and represent with the IRS. So this is the IRS's specific designation saying, hey, we have said that this person is qualified to work with us. And so this is someone, they may not necessarily have an accounting degree from a university, but they've gone through those tests with the IRS and are qualified to file taxes. And then tax preparer is anyone else who files taxes, because there's only a handful of states that have any sort of requirement for who can file taxes in that state. Whether that is some sort of registration with the state, whether that's some sort of exam with the state, some sort of continuing education with the state, there is a very small percentage of states in the US that have that requirement. And so if you are in a state that doesn't have any regulation around tax preparers, again, you're going to have someone who just can wake up and decide that they're a tax preparer and file that on your behalf. And so when you're looking for someone to file your taxes, you need to understand those distinctions because they have different levels of hoops that individual has jumped through to be able to do that work. The next thing with why it's hard to find a good tax preparer is that the pipeline is drying up. So what you have is that there are fewer and fewer individuals enrolling in accounting degrees these days. And part of that is because the traditional trajectory of getting an accounting degree is you go to college, you get the accounting degree, and then you start at a big or mid-sized firm. And as a junior accountant, it is a slog. And I should say, I did not go through the traditional accounting path. This is not my personal experience, but this is experience that many CPAs that I work with have talked to me about. We've had conversations about, and there's also a slew of articles coming out about this right now because it's kind of a big deal in the industry. And so you have the traditional path was you did the degree, then you went to a firm and you worked your butt off, right? And tax season is intense for tax preparing firms. That's traditionally around January through April. Some firms sort of kick it off in December, depends on the firm. But traditionally you had people working their butts off, working massive overtime for 4 months straight to get all of this out. And so it's just a lot. It's a lot, it means that you're not having a lot of time off. It means that, you're probably working on weekends, long nights. And that was just what was expected. However, at the same time, those sorts of hours for an accounting or for an accounting / tax preparing firm, what's happening now is that the compensation for that level of work is not the same as the compensation, say, if you were an investment banker doing the same sorts of hours, or, doing auditing at one of the consulting firms, for example. And so what the industry has seen is that accountants who go in, get the degree, and start working are getting burnt out really quickly and either, quitting accounting entirely or moving over to one of those other related finance industries that have similar hours but better pay. And so the accountants who are going through the degree process, going into a firm, are getting burnt out and quitting entirely and going and doing something else, and so that then also feeds into less people going in to get the degree in the first place because they're hearing these stories about, the financial incentive for this level of work isn't there. And so then people aren't choosing to do that degree to even begin with. And so this is feeding into why there are less and less tax preparers because there's just less people going in. And the pandemic also really hurt this because the average age of a CPA, sort of depending on where you get the statistic, there's some variability, but it's around the 50s, somewhere in their 50s. And so what we saw with the pandemic was that there was actually a lot of people older than their 50s in accounting. And when the pandemic hit, many of them either closed up shop because switching to, remote work just didn't, work for them. Or they were like, I'm close to retiring anyway. Let me just retire now. Or unfortunately, a number of them passed away due to complications from the pandemic. And so the existing professional base in the industry was just not set up for the pandemic at all. And that had far-reaching consequences because it meant that base that was there went away and we're not having increase in new talent coming in. So those are the reasons why it's hard to find both a bookkeeper and a tax preparer in the current accounting landscape of the US. And then there's two other things that are going on with this sort of difficulty in finding an accounting professional. This is a conversation that we have with our clients and prospective clients very frequently. So the first thing within this is that because the landscape of accounting has changed with cloud accounting over, the past several decades, is it means that the roles start getting murky. And as technology can do more and more, it means that what a bookkeeper does and what a tax preparer does has changed. And it means that there's more room for advisory level services from both of those professionals. But that also means that it's harder to compare apples to apples. It's a lot of times comparing apples to oranges because one tax preparer will do X, Y, and Z, but another one will only do X, Y, and A. Same with a bookkeeper. They may do A, B, and C, but they also may do B. They also may do, D that traditionally is within, the role of a CFO or a tax preparer. And so when you are trying to find professionals to support your business within the accounting sphere, you have to have a very clear understanding of what each individual does, not just what each role does, because the individuals and firms within both of those spheres, bookkeeping and tax preparation, can be wildly different. And so it requires, again, a lot more work on the business owner's part to figure out who do I need to support me. And then the final piece of this is that there's an unfortunate trend in the industry that I don't know why it happens, but a lot of times we have new clients come to us because their previous bookkeeper or CPA just went MIA, radio silence for months. I have no idea why that is common, but unfortunately it is. And so that's another issue that clients frequently have, is just finding someone who actually shows up reliably. And so you can have a good relationship, but if they go MIA, then, you're having to go find a new professional all over again. And so it's for this reason, and because we see it, unfortunately, frequently, that we really recommend having two different professionals, having your bookkeeper and your tax preparer be different firms or individuals, because we've seen very unfortunate circumstances where, someone will have one person, they go MIA, and then you have real liability and penalties and fees because the person who was supposed to be filing X, Y, and Z didn't, and then you are now on the hook for that. And so having that separation between who does your bookkeeping and who does your tax preparation really helps limit exposure to liability. And it also means that if you are sensing something funny about one of those people, you can go to the other professional and be like, hey, I'm having issues with this. Is that common? Is that just a lack of my understanding? Or is there something that I should be concerned about here? And so it gives you a level of checks and balances that is really beneficial, so that you don't end up in a position where you're just entirely in the dark because the one person that should have been doing it isn't. So those are sort of the big outline of why it's really difficult to find a good CPA and a good bookkeeper in this current accounting landscape in the US. So if you found this helpful, please leave a comment, please share it. Let me know if there's additional behind the scenes of the accounting industry that you want to know more about. And until next time, this was Follow the Bookkeeper, and I am Morgan Trine.